Hey, this is Andrew Brown from Exam Pro, and we are looking at computing services on AWS, starting with EC2, which stands for Elastic Compute Cloud. And you can see that I've made a division there, and that's just to emphasize how important EC2 is, and the fact that basically every service under the hood is using EC2. So no matter what you're using, whether it's a Lambda, RDS, or Redshift, they're all running on EC2 instances. They just might be abstracted away from you because AWS is managing those EC2 instances, okay? And so what is EC2? Well, it's a highly configurable server where you get to choose your CPU, memory, network, and operating system, okay? So now moving on to the other computing services, we have ECS, which stands for Elastic Container Service. And this is basically Docker as a service. So if you need to run microservices or a Dockerized application, you're going to be launching it on ECS. So with ECS, what you would do is you would just choose the type of EC2 instance you want, and that EC2 instance will come pre-configured with Docker running on it. And then it has a really nice interface so that you would just define your containers within something called a task or a service, and then you would just run them on ECS, okay? Next on this list, you have Fargate, and this is also for microservices, and this is kind of like the evolution of ECS. So with ECS, you choose what EC2 instance you need to use. Fargate, you don't choose the EC2 instance. You just would define your containers within a task or a service, and you would just tell them to run, and AWS would just have it run, okay? And so the difference here is that you aren't paying for the EC2 instance, you're just paying for the runtime and the CPU utilized, okay? So it's kind of like Lambdas, where you're just paying for the time performed and the resources used, okay? Moving on to EKS, which is Kubernetes as a service. And so if you've never heard of Kubernetes, it's becoming the de facto standard for microservices within the industry. And so since it's so important, AWS has decided that it needs to have a service to run Kubernetes, and it's called EKS, okay? So it gives you all the benefits of ECS, but allows you to run the open source Kubernetes, okay? And again, this is just for microservices. Moving on to Lambda. Lambda lets you run serverless functions. So the idea here is that you just upload your code in the form of function, and it just runs. You don't have to think about the servers. There's nothing to provision. Everything is taken care of for you, and you are just paying for the compute time based on how long it runs, okay? So that's all there is with Lambda. Okay, and then moving on to Elastic Beanstalk. And so Elastic Beanstalk is going to orchestrate various amounts of AWS services for you. So the idea is it will set up EC2, S3, SNS, CloudWatch, RDS, load balancers, whatever you need to run your web application. And the idea behind Elastic Beanstalk, it allows you to set up developer environments. That's what it's intended for. It's not really for production use, but the idea is, like, let's say you're a developer and you have a web app, and it's running on Ruby on Rails or Django or Laravel, and you just want to get it running, but you don't want to have to think about all the services you have to set up. You would just upload your code to Elastic Beanstalk. It would do the rest for you. So that's all there is there to that service. And it really just is using EC2 again. So it's just going to set up EC2 instances for you, but you just don't have to worry about it. Moving on to AWS Batch. So AWS Batch, as the name implies, for batch processing. So you can plan, schedule, and execute your batch computing workloads across the full range of AWS compute services and features. And so what it's doing is it's just launching EC2 instances for you using spot pricing so that you can save a lot of money. So there you go. That is all the computing services you need to know.